I'll talk. I'll talk with you later today, Judge Freeman, and let you know what we accomplish at today's meeting.
Perfect. Thank you, Judge Garrett, for doing that.
Sure. And good luck with your meeting. Hope it goes well.
Thanks.
Okay. And it sounds like Dave Reynolds will be joining us then in a little bit. But in the meantime, I'm glad that you're here, John Krause, and can talk to us about what's going on in pretrial services.
Yes.
You can hear me. Good, good.
Yes, gotcha.
Okay. Hi. Okay. Well, let's do a brief recap of our last meeting. I must say, I'm still digging out from the chaos that I caused by moving out of my judge's chambers and into my house. And so I don't have my notes from that meeting readily available. But I do have my memory, and we talked about pretrial services, the pretrial services unit, and its work now, and what its work should be during this time of the pandemic, when we're not, when our incarcerations are about as low as we get them. So we've got that issue to talk about. And then, is Carol Donovan with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, good. Hi, Carol. We're going to talk about, oh, good. And I can see your image. That's good. We're also going to talk with Carol Donovan and Stephen Gockley and me about our reconstituting, with the help of Jill, of minority advocacy groups that we contacted a year or two ago as we were looking at pretrial risk assessment. Are there other issues that we need to talk about today in our meeting? Okay, well, they may come up in the discussion, but John, either you or Dave Reynolds were going to get some statistical information, numbers about who, the numbers of people that you've been serving as pretrial defendants during these last several months, and the kinds of charges that are, I think it was the kinds of charges that are involved. Again, I'm working without my notes before me, so add on, anyone, if more detail is needed or if I get something wrong. But I'm not sure, John, whether you or Dave Reynolds took that on and where we are on that. Can you give us a brief update?
Yeah, the type of charges. I wasn't really instructed. I think Dave and Andrew might have the type of charges and the statistics on those. They've been keeping record of those. I can give you the case numbers for specifically who are on pretrial and those kind of things. But I think it was more of a statistic on the cases on pretrial that they're going to take. So.
Okay, and why don't you give us that information in terms of the numbers of people on pretrial services? I know we looked at those numbers last time, but I don't think they were definitive.
Yeah, so right now we got 190 defendants on active monitoring, I guess, supervision with pretrial. And a lot of those span they've been up since 2019. Some were assigned since we started, and some have dropped off through having charges dismissed, pleas, or put into another court like district court or something. But right now we have 190. There's 99 medium level, 62 low level, and then 29 on the high level that are assigned. And for the last month, we got an 82% compliance rate, which means compliance is defined as those checking in that are required to check in with us. And so we got an 82%. And then the compliance rate on all laws being broken is probably higher, and those numbers were kind of being kept by Dave and Andrew on their Excel since pretrial has started.
You think those numbers are higher for people being in compliance with their pretrial conditions?
Yes, and I was pointing out that the other one, new law violations are much higher than in compliance with checking in.
But I just want to, are people in compliance with no new violations of the law? I mean, you said it was more than 80%. That's more than 80% who have no new violations. Is that right?
It's the amount checking in. The 82% of the caseload is checking in as required.
Right. And for no new violations, what?
I would say that's a lower percentage of compliance. I don't have those specific numbers.
Oh, that's interesting. So you got more people checking in than you have than you have staying out of legal trouble, basically.
Correct.
Which means
Most of
we've
our
got
violations. Yeah, I was just going to point out most of our violations are to the court or all laws, breaches of new law.
yeah, or new breaches of law. I imagine. Okay. I don't know if you have any statistics on that. I don't want to make any assumptions, but I'm thinking about people with repetitive drug charges, and I don't know if they're a big segment of that group. And you probably don't know either because you haven't been keeping those numbers. I wonder, Dr. Peterson, do you have anything you could add to that number-wise?
I don't actually know. I haven't gotten a file in over a year.
Oh,
So yeah, I don't know who's currently in supervision or not. But if John has the case numbers, if he sends me the case numbers, I can match those up and find those individuals.
okay.
So we can talk later, John, about that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
okay.
Let's get
We've
all
been
the
keeping,
good.
they're up to date, so we got all that information.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll be in touch.
Okay.
Okay, good. Dave Reynolds may have more information for us, so we may come back to this topic when Dave joins us. I know he's in the judges meeting right now, but am hoping that that meeting will end in time for him to join us. So I guess that brings us to the update on our other topic identified for today, which is our desire to contact the advocacy groups with whom we've spoken in the past. But we've talked also about not sort of sandbagging them with questions about pretrial risk assessments until we've given them a better sense of what we're doing, and then not confining the discussion simply to pretrial risk assessments, but getting some input from those people and those groups about their views about any measures we can take to make our full system, but especially our pretrial system, as well, I guess inclusive isn't the right word for a punitive system, but to make our system as egalitarian as possible and free of any kind of disproportionality. And I see that Jill, thank you for your efforts there. Jill helped us reconstitute the list. And Carol, have you had a chance to go over the list that Jill's produced, and do you have anything to add to it?
I looked at it briefly. I don't have it in front of me right now, but I did have a couple of notes regarding some possible places we might look to identify other people to include, including there was a large, I think it was called a solidarity rally on June 6th in Bellingham with a number of speakers from a number of different groups working on racial equity issues. And there's a Bellingham Herald article that names some of those speakers who might also be aware of who the other speakers were. So I was wondering about those folks. And then also looking back during the election for county prosecutor in 2018, the Whatcom Civil Rights Project had held a forum, and there were a number of panelists at that forum. It was held at First Congregational Church, and I do have the names of those panelists as well. So those just might be a couple additional lists of community leaders, and there's quite a lot of overlap among those lists, and also with the people that we've mentioned who are working towards the Racial Equity Commission for Whatcom County.
You know,
Oh,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I can add to that. I think we sort of implicitly adopted a strategy of trying to find some key people and fan out from them to their networks. The two people who have been mentioned by 3 or 4 people as hubs of those wheels are Suling Zhao and Christina Michelle. They show up in the listening sessions, the June 6th Solidarity Rally. They're really the developers of the effort toward a Racial Equity Commission. And I just got in touch with both of them, and I'm scheduled to have a Zoom meeting with them this Thursday.
Oh, good.
So they're very interested in what we're doing, what we're asking of them. My hope was, and I thought this was part of our earlier conversation, was that Judge Garrett, you were going to just fine tune the letter you had to incorporate the sort of the pause we're doing on actually implementing the PSA, and so that we can give them to that to them to distribute if they're willing. And I can also report that one of the people who participated in our meeting 2 years ago was City Council Member Hannah Stone. And I've communicated with Council Member Stone. She's very interested in re-engaging with this. I'm not sure what network she would pull in at this point, because I think she's less active on a community level in immigration rights issues, but I'll certainly encourage her to disseminate whatever we want to put out for that.
Good, good. Stephen, you reminded me of my commitment to fine tune that letter so graciously and tactfully. Thank you. I haven't done that, but I will. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
The transition from working life to a different life has been kind of major psychologically, not in a bad way, but in a way that has caused me to forget a couple things, including that. So it's back on my list in writing, and I will do that within the next short period of time.
That would be great. And I'll let them know that we'll have something for them whenever, soon. I think I'm the only person on this call who understands exactly what you're referring to about that mental transition. But I do appreciate what that's like. And
Yes, you come to see yourself quite differently. Yeah, and I imagine that's really hard for some people. It hasn't been hard for me yet, but I'm still a newbie at this, so we'll see how it goes. So far, I highly recommend it, though. Carol, I wanted to ask you, who are the people from the Whatcom Civil Rights Panel that you are aware of? I just wonder, because I used to be active with that panel, right up until I ran for judge, and then not after that.
I don't claim to have the definitive list at all. But let's see. At the forum during the prosecutor's race, Junga Subadar was the facilitator of that forum.
Yes.
I think that Ceci Lopez is currently involved with the Whatcom Civil Rights Project and/or the Center for Law and Diversity up at Western. Terrence Morris was one of the panelists who also was active with Black Lives Matter at that point and was one of the people we had invited when we held our large meeting. There were a couple Indigenous women on that panel, Talia London and her mother, who's an elder, Lucy London, and Maru Moravilpando, who's been involved with some immigration rights issues, was also present, as well as Jim Peterson from Homes Now.
Okay, good. Good, thank you.
And again, I know all of those people are well connected to other networks as well.
Yeah, I'm especially glad to hear of Ceci Lopez's continuing involvement, because the Civil Rights Panel historically has worked with Western and particularly Fairhaven College. So that's, and that the program, I forget what it's called now. It used to be called Law and Diversity, but in any event, good. Yes, we should.
Is the Civil Rights Panel distinct from the Human Rights Task Force? Are those two different bodies?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
The Human Rights Task Force, at least in my memory, it has been more community-based. And although Damani Johnson is heavily involved, it's not a Western focused endeavor, although I'm sure there's Western involved. And I don't know about the Civil Rights Panel. When I was involved with it from about, I don't know, 2005 up until 2012, it had a pretty strong connection with the Law and Diversity program. And a lot of the Law and Diversity students, it's essentially interned with the Civil Rights program. So I don't know any more recently than that, but historically, it's been much more connected to the university than the Human Rights Task Force has been.
I asked because I recalled that, number one, representatives of the Human Rights Task Force did attend our prior meeting, and they have been very vocal about Camp 210 and other homeless issues. So I think there's been a changeover on that group, but I saw recently there's at least one person still on that who came to our meeting. So that would be another hub of a network to contact as well, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And of course, if we, what we can do is contact all the people we contacted before, all of these new people and groups that we're identifying, and then ask them to let us know, or to simply invite other people or groups that they're aware of, so that we can get a pretty robust list of initial contacts anyway. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what.
If I might just jump in, it looks like the Whatcom Civil Rights Project at this point is a joint collaboration between law advocates and the Whatcom Peace and Justice Center.
Okay.
I think that was always the case.
Go ahead.
I think that's always been the case. When I used to be on the board of law advocates, which goes back a long time, there's always been that connection. I think the panel has been the more active piece of that partnership. But
Okay, yeah, I agree. I think that I agree. It's been connected with law advocates for a long time, certainly was when I was involved. And I think the role of law advocates has been, at least in part, to supply lawyers for cases that are being looked at by the panel. That was my role anyway. I was a lawyer recruited through law advocates. Okay. So Carol and Stephen and Jill, can you work together and each supply the information that you've got and that you've given today, so that we can kind of make up the definitive list of people and organizations that we should contact? And while you do that, I'll refine the letter that will go to those people and contacts. And the idea would be that we could do this now, so that we could report back at our next meeting. What do we want to ask these people to do? Do we want them to come to a meeting? Do we want to set a meeting? Do we want to simply have them indicate their level of interest, or how do we want to handle this?
I like what we had talked about at some point earlier, that we would, number one, want to distribute your letter to bring them up to date on this work group's progress. Number two, reopen the opportunity for input on pretrial risk assessment in general, because that remains a controversial topic in the community. And hopefully they would be able to understand a little bit more about why we're choosing to go ahead with one. And then I think you described, Judge Garrett, a little more open-ended conversation about other suggestions they might have for criminal legal reform or pretrial reforms
On a local basis.
on a local basis. So, and that we would be inviting them to a conversation where all of those could be explored at a little more in a little more depth.
Okay. Yes, sorry, Stephen, it's coming back to me. We discussed all these things, but how do we want to get that information from the people? Do we want to invite them to a meeting? Do we want to invite them to respond in writing? I sort of disfavor that because it becomes a project and is easy to put off, as you could see with my letter.
I think it would be better, my view is it would be better to have an open meeting where there can be exchange, because I don't think this is just the statement of positions and then no chance to bounce ideas back and forth. And I think the other thing we're looking for is eventually in that conversation to build some trust between the voices, and also have a chance on that basis to invite some participation from certain community members in subsequent oversight that this work group might have on racial equity questions with help from Dr. Peterson.
That makes sense. And it would be, I think, a very good thing if we could get one or two people from advocacy groups who are familiar with the legal and justice system to join our group. Our group began as a group of people who work in the justice system, and I want to keep, I think it's important for us to keep that focus rather than opening, than involving too much generalism, because our job ultimately is to advise the judges, and we want to do that in a way that's as informed as possible about the practical realities that the judges face, you know, on a local level, as opposed to more theoretical ideas about criminal justice reform generally. But that being said, it would be really good to have some involvement from of people who are familiar with all of the issues, both the workings of the justice system in its pretrial phases, and the realities of disparate impacts on minority people and that perspective. And perhaps in this process of garnering more general information, we can identify a couple of people who are familiar enough with the justice system that that they could be helpful in this work group as well. Does that make sense? I don't want to sound exclusionary, but I really am. I do want anybody that's involved in our work group to really be familiar with the day-to-day work of the judges, so that our advice to them is practical rather than more big picture than they can apply. I don't know. What do you all think?
think you're 100% correct. I think that's, I don't really want to get bogged down with policy. We're more of a working group.
Exactly.
That's why, we've kind of split away from the reduction in incarceration committee because that just got too big. And this is more of a work group. So I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Okay, good. Do others agree with Dave and me on that?
Yeah,
mean,
I think that's great.
Yeah, I think
Just
we
John.
really, I think we really have to, because the judges have the task force as a whole to be advising them about theoretical and larger term policy issues. Certainly, they're no strangers to those issues. There's a lot of discussion at the national and to a lesser degree at the state level about those issues. But our questions for our judges are, what can you do today in this case that's in front of you now? How can you handle that in a way that meets the goals of reducing incarceration and in an equal way?
I think the additional value of that approach is there are very interested community stakeholders who don't have much knowledge of the sub levels of the system that we're working with on a very practical level in this work group. I mean, this work group has a pretty constrained focus. And so I think for them to learn a little bit about this level of how the criminal legal system operates and think about ways that they can contribute ideas at that level as well, rather than the global levels that a lot of the conversation happens at, would be helpful in the community, because they can take that perspective back to their action groups as well.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay. So I think what we would want to do then is invite all of the people to whom we're going to be sending this letter soon, before this work group meets again. And so we need to figure out what we're going to ask exactly. And if what we're going to ask is that people, we could give them an either or choice. They could either respond in writing with their perspectives and interests, or attend a meeting of our work group. And our work group's meeting would be focused primarily, that meeting would be with all of us in the work group, but with a focus on considerations of equality. Does that make sense? And that meeting obviously would involve our full work group, not just Carol and me and Stephen. What do you all think? I can only see Stephen. I saw him give me a thumbs up. Others, I'm sorry that I can't see you, but I can't. Can you weigh in audibly?
This is Maya. I agree.
Okay, good. Hi, Maya. Thank you. Any opposition? Does anybody else think we should go a different route?
No apparent negative indications.
Okay. All right, we've got that plan. And we don't have, so we should come up with a time for us to have this meeting. Should that be at our next scheduled committee meeting, which I believe would be what, March 2nd?
I would like to suggest that we get in, for instance, when I talked to Sue and Christina on Thursday, I think that's a question I should ask them, because some of the feedback we got at our earlier meeting was time of day.
That's true.
Location. Yeah. So I'd like to see what they have to say about that.
Okay. Location probably isn't much of an issue this time around, but time of day certainly is. And yeah. Okay, well, so we can figure that out initially by correspondence with the people that Carol and Stephen and Jill and I will be corresponding with. But then ultimately, we'll set the meeting for the whole work group because we want the full work group involved in the meeting. All right. And as
Could I just ask Judge Garrett, Maya, I suspect you might have some community linkages that would reach voices that would want to have a say in some of this. If you do, can you let us know who those are, or you may contact yourself?
Yeah, I was thinking of Sue and Christina, who are working on the race equity committee or task force as well. I mean, they were really the people that leapt first to my mind, unless you want it. I mean, if you wanted like a formerly incarcerated person or something like that, I don't know how far broad we're going. It seems like we're trying to keep it fairly tight.
Well, I would just say give that some thought, and
Mhm.
if you want to recommend anybody or several anybody's, let one of the three of us know.
Okay.
Thank you.
okay. We don't have Dave Reynolds with us yet, and I suspect that the issues that they have to cover in the judges meeting may take some time to cover. So we may not get Dave within the next couple minutes. I think. So do we have other issues we need to discuss in this meeting now? Or should we table the statistics issue until our next meeting with the understanding that Andrew and Dave Reynolds and John Kraus will be talking about getting those numbers to Dr. Peterson in the interim between now and the next meeting? That wasn't much of a question. I think that's what we should do. Do you all agree?
Carol, you
Judge
look
Garrett,
like
Yes.
can I ask one thing on our previous topic? I was just looking at some notes from a conversation that you and Stephen and I had back in December. And I think you both know quite a bit more about this than I do, but there are in the notes some recommendations about recommending to the task force and to the Superior Court judicial officers to do some work with the racial equity toolkit. Is that an item for discussion at this group, or does that go somewhere else?
Thank you, Carol. That's a good reminder. And I don't know, right around the time that I sent that email to you, I sent copies of the racial equity toolkit literature to, I know I sent it to the judges, and I believe I sent it to the commissioners too. And told them that I'm sure they haven't read it, because I told them this will be coming up eventually. And so I didn't say, the test is next week. But I will follow up on that. And the county has given me, this is a cursing and a blessing. The county has given me continuing access to my administrative email files, which is where I have filed a lot of that correspondence. So I believe I have the ability to go back to that December email. If I can't, as a practical matter, I'll contact you, Carol, and ask you to send me a copy of it. And then I'll follow up with the judges on that. Thank you for that reminder. Do we have other things we need to cover today? Another deafening silence. Okay. We have a meeting set for March 2nd. That's a question, not a, Jill, you can probably answer that. Are we set up?
The next regular meeting of this committee is scheduled for April 20th.
Okay. We meet every other month,
Yes.
but why April 20th? Did we decide to go to the, what is that, the third Tuesday?
I don't recall if we set
Okay.
a specific first, second, third, fourth Tuesday of the month.
All right.
Some negotiation on everyone's schedules.
All right. Well, let me just ask for input. Does anybody have an objection to our next meeting being April 20th?
I think that'll give plenty of time to get the information in and the return of information. And
I do too. And we may be, I mean, the optimist in me says we may be at that point getting closer to more normal court operations. That might be unduly optimistic, but I think as vaccinations become more widespread, we can, I hope, get at least to the planning stage for more normal court operations. We won't be there by April 20th, that's for sure, but we may be able to look at it with a more clear perspective than we have right now. So April 20th seems good to me.
Just to continue the theme of undue optimism, it's conceivable we could actually pull off this community discussion before then and use that as an opportunity to debrief a little bit on what takes place there.
Use the April 20th meeting to debrief.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And so let's just keep our group as notified as possible about scheduling of that larger group meeting with the advocacy groups, because we may well be able to fit that in before April 20th. Yeah. And our group, members of our group won't have to do a great deal of preparation. We're familiar with the questions, and the purpose of the meeting would be more for us to listen than to talk ourselves. I'm just sort of thinking out loud. So yeah, good chance we could do that. Perhaps you're unduly optimistic, Stephen, but I hope not. It sounds workable to me. Good. All right. Is there anything else that we need to address at this meeting? All right. Going forward then, we've got the plan for Dr. Peterson and Dave Reynolds and John Kraus to meet and discuss the numbers. And then Carol and Stephen and Jill and I will be working to pull together a group. Please, all of the rest of you, contact any of us if you have any ideas or insights about other people to contact. And I will do my part of fine tuning that letter over the next couple days, later this week. Good. I think that covers everything we need to cover.
Whoops,
And-
sorry. May I interject? Just,
You bet.
sorry, when you make connection with these people and determine a time that's agreeable to them, the intention is that the whole work group will meet with them. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, so sometime hopefully between now and April is the goal.
That's the
Or-
goal.
Okay, thank you. I'll watch for that.
It sounds likely to me that it will be an evening meeting, just because a number of people raised the concern about daytime meetings. Now that may not be, they may not have the same concerns now that we're doing everything by Zoom. And they may be working remotely, who knows? But it may be an evening meeting. One of the things we'll ask is their preferences on meeting times.
Right, I understand. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Maya.
Can I just ask, Jill, would you be able to support an evening meeting?
Yes, I should be able to do that.
Great.
I
Great.
would
Thank
suggest
you.
also, if any of you have hard days or times you cannot do a meeting, that would probably be a good idea to let myself, Stephen, and or Judge Garrett know, and we can avoid those inconvenient times when scheduling.
Good. Yeah. And our goal will be to get, maximum attendance. That may mean we have to leave somebody out, but we'll strive to leave out the fewest number of people. Anyway. Yeah. Okay. Thank you all. It was good to see you all, however, virtually. And I'll look forward to seeing you on April 20th and hopefully before then. And in the meantime, we'll be in touch, email wise.
All right,
Thank
everyone,
you.
thanks.
And
Thank you, Judge Garrett.